Welcome back to another half of Question Time at City University in Islington. I'm James Pearson. Joining me on the panel today are Peter Hitchens, a columnist for the Mail on Sunday. He has also written for The Guardian and The Spectator. He's authored 5 books, including the autobiographical work The Rage Against God. Nikki Henderson is an expert on both domestic and foreign affairs who read politics and philosophy at Oxford. She was editor of feminist magazine Tone and has a qualification in teaching English overseas. Charlotte Brea-Edney is a broadcaster who's written papers on gender and foreign affairs and runs a website on community policing. She speaks 4 languages, including, of course, Russian, and has spent considerable time in the country. Rosie Unwin is a theatre and art critic and is the founder of the UK's first inter-university drama festival. She's edited for student newspapers and for radio. She's also travelled widely and has spent time in Africa and Australia. And last, but certainly not least, Charlie Burden is a broadcaster and historian who worked on Radio 4's Woman's Hour. Before coming to City, she worked in retail management and primary education. That's our panel. Please welcome them. Let's have our first question from Danita Moore.
Will a public sector strike during the London Olympics showcase the best of British?
Union leader Len McCusty of Unite the Union has suggested public sector workers should create civil disobedience during the Games. Boris Johnson has promised a strike-free event. Peter Hitchens, why shouldn't workers go on strike at this time?
Well, why shouldn't they? It's a free country. And indeed, it is the best of British. It's one of the few things we're still good at, striking. So let them do it. And if it messes up the Olympics, I couldn't care less. As far as I'm concerned, I wish they'd never brought them here. I can't think, I have to say, why a country which is so obsessively concerned about the supposed terrorist threat would want to import into its capital city an event of this size and vulnerability. It's just madness. As for the expense, we're all going to be paying for it till we're dead. So let them disrupt it, as far as I'm concerned.
Nikki, the best celebration would be strikes and not the Olympics.
Well, I think Peter's point is exactly right. I think that 98% of people in this country don't have tickets to the Olympics and will be enjoying it if they bother from their sofa. I think that it's ridiculous that we should pretend that striking or civil disobedience during the Olympics counts as unpatriotic, which is what it's been branded by leaders. Len McCluskey said, why should we pretend it's all rosy in the garden for 2 weeks in the middle of the sun?
I'm sorry, Nikki. Look, public sector cuts have been going on for a long time and they're going to continue. I just don't think there's a compelling reason why they need to do it during the Olympics. Just pick a different time.
There's a very
I mean, they don't have public support for it. You know, it's just ridiculous, really. Also, I think, you know, Bob Crow and Len McCluskey and their chums, they know very well the best way to create disruption is to get transport workers on strike. That's probably why Bob Crow this week refused a £500 bonus on top of, I add, the £50,000 that tube workers already earn, which is much more than most people in London, to work during the Olympics. So I just think, you know, it's just greedy. You know, if that's not greed, I don't know what is.
Charlie Burden, if I could just bring in here, are the tube workers and the RMT taking advantage of their position then?
I think it's absolutely outrageous. There is no way they should be striking during the Olympics. Firstly, it's completely unpatriotic, and if we're trying to get money into the economy, well, the government have estimated that we'll get an extra 4 million visitors this year. Add that to the 100 billion that UK tourism brings into the country. I mean, it would be ludicrous to strike during the Olympics.
As far as I can discover, the Olympics have messed up tourism to London quite considerably by blocking a huge number of hotel bookings.
You got to think about the legacy, though.
Well,
Peter.
also, as for patriotism, this isn't the coronation. This is just a bunch of sportsmen, most of them who will be on drugs, setting fake records. Who cares? Who needs it?
The national humiliation that would be caused by a strike during the Olympics, I think we would never recover from. Although I believe that, being patriotic, we should be exercising our right to democratically strike, I believe the humiliation would be unbelievably bad for Britain, and I don't think it would be a good move.
You keep talking about greedy union workers.
Briefly,
what about these greedy hoteliers who are upping their prices ridiculously?
Okay, thank you. We're going to have to move on to the next question now, which is from Will Rowe.
Should young people stop complaining about doing a decent day's work?
Now, the government originally said it would withhold benefits from 16 to 24-year-olds taking work experience on the great Get Britain Working programme. Now they can keep them. Rosie Unwin.
Well, James, I was very impressed with this scheme for 2 reasons. Firstly, it was going to do something for the 1 million, more than 1 million actually, 16 to 24-year-olds out of work currently in the UK. Secondly, initially, the government were going to do something about it if these kids dropped out. They were going to remove their benefits. That has now changed in a dramatic U-turn this week, which I disagree with. I think what the government is doing is backing down, and it's actually weak. Also, it's promoting a lazy work ethic amongst our youth, and I think that's incredibly dangerous.
Are we going to see a dropout now, Charlie?
To be honest, Rosie, I think you should give our young people a bit more credit. I mean, this scheme is a great scheme, don't get me wrong, but I think the government were absolutely right to drop the sanctions. By dropping the sanctions, they've got a chance to save the schemes. I mean, businesses were dropping out. They dropped them.
But it is
200 businesses.
It is a voluntary scheme, Charlie.
It is absolutely a voluntary scheme, but now 200 businesses have said they want to take part. It will tackle the unemployment problem. Surely it's a good thing.
Peter, young people have worked for unpaid work experience for years. Why should it be different now?
Well, the thing which bothers me about this scheme, and has from the start, is not that people are being made to work, which has to be a good thing, but the fact that the companies taking part in the scheme get the work for nothing. I think there's something fundamentally wrong with that, which sticks in my gizzard. And if that were not part of it, then I'd be prepared to take it. When you see large supermarket chains and burger chains and people like that receiving work for nothing, you tend to think, if you're me, there's something slightly wrong with it.
If I could just bring in, Nikki, does work experience like this amount to slavery?
No, I think throwing around the word slavery is very, very unhelpful and actually offensive to some people. I think, however, that this scheme is not a very good idea. I think that it's another way in which the government is showing that it's not actually very strong at helping out young people. They're shouting from the rooftops that they're getting 50% of people into work out of the scheme. As it is, a young person not involved in the scheme who's on benefits over a 3-month period, 60% of these people end up with jobs.
On that point,
so they're actually doing worse than they would be.
But Nikki, I just think it doesn't matter what the success rate for this particular scheme is. The fact is these young people are getting some work experience on their CV where they had nothing before. And I think that can only be a good move.
But they're not getting jobs out of it.
Well, some of them are. And second of all, I have to say, like, Peter's point was so right. Let's take companies like Poundland, which has, brought into this whole thing. And I just think, they earned £31.7 million in profits last year. Would it hurt them that much to pay these young people something for their time?
The thing that I come with here is work experience is so much part of our culture. It is the thing. It is expected now. I know these companies are having huge turnovers, but work experience is what we do now. You're expected to have it. Graduates are, and we can't avoid that. We can't run away from it.
Thank you. Well, this will run on as more firms join the programme. Can we have our third question from Danielle Robinson?
Has the law and the police failed to tackle Britain's drug problem?
The head of the UN's International Control Board for Drugs has said that law enforcement in the UK and other countries has failed to control drugs gangs in cities. He's even compared some areas of Liverpool and Manchester to the inner cities of Brazil and Mexico. Nikki Henderson.
I think that we do have a really serious drugs problem in this country. I think one of the problems that I have whenever we open up this discussion about the drugs problem and drugs policies is that we have remarkably little evidence about which policies will work best for Britain. There's a lot of discussion between, should we be using a zero tolerance policy? Should we be legalising drugs? Where we should be going with this? And there's very little evidence. If you look at the UK Drugs Policy Commission, their report in 2009 said the lack of evaluation of the evidence is a real problem that we have here. I mean, we try to compare ourselves with Europe. In Sweden, they have a really strong zero drugs policy. In the Netherlands, they have legalisation of cannabis. Both of those countries are doing better on drugs than we are. So we need something that's specifically right for us.
Peter, you're going to be appearing before the Home Affairs Committee about a drugs review this year. What will you be saying to them?
Well, I will be saying that we're constantly told by people that there is a war against drugs which has failed. And this is a fiction. There has been no war against drugs in this country since the Misuse of Drugs Act 1971, which effectively decriminalised cannabis in a slow motion way, which is now almost totally. You'll find police officers who will admit that it's effectively decriminalised. If you're caught in possession of cannabis now, you're given something called the cannabis warning, which doesn't even get recorded centrally and is certainly not a criminal record. It is a fiction that there is any kind of battle to control. Well, we failed. What I want and what will happen are so far removed from each other that it's almost futile to talk about it. If for 40 years you allow a very dangerous and unpleasant drug to run free in your society and to be more or less freely sold and used, it's going to be very difficult indeed. A very dangerous drug. And if you doubt it, then read the horrifying book by my great friend Patrick Cockburn called Henry's Demons, about the awful thing which happened to his beautiful son Henry as a result of smoking cannabis if you think that it's a harmless soft drug. It's a disastrous and dangerous poison. It should have been seriously restricted.
Well, what I will say is that the UN report that James said wasn't actually helpful, because I don't believe that Britain is anywhere near in the same league as countries in South America.
No, that was laughable. It's ridiculous.
Which isn't true. However, I disagree with Peter's point that nothing has really been done, because from what I've been researching, the police have actually increased their number of drug seizures. In 2010, there were 9% more than in 2009, and I think that something is being done. But as Nikki was saying, it's very hard to know how bad the problem is and how to actually tackle it.
Yeah, but if you don't interdict demand, interdicting supply is pointless. You can go on seizing drugs at ports of entry and sending the SAS to Colombia as much as you like, but if people still think it's legal to smoke cannabis and snort cocaine, and indeed if the government is giving heroin users methadone as a substitute for it, which pretty much says your habit is fine,
if I could just
then there's no point in seizing these things, is there? Because one hand is saying use them and the other is saying we're against them.
Charlotte, you run a website on community policing. What's a PCSO saying to you?
Well, listen, it sounds like what Peter's asking for is zero tolerance, and the fact is that tougher laws on drugs cost the police more money, and right now the police just don't have that money, especially in inner cities like Manchester and Birmingham and Liverpool that are mentioned in the report. Actually, the police are facing a 20% cut across the board, and over half of all police services in England have said that they can't afford to spend more money on drugs, and they're going to be spending less. You're asking for something they can't deliver. They simply can't deliver.
If we could just get around
what is it that the police do apart from having lunch with some journalists in the IB? What is it that they do? You never see them. They've vanished. There are more of them than there have ever been in the history of this country. You never see them. What is it that they do that's so expensive? I'm quite prepared. I think any government would be prepared to pay for the shoe leather for them
I'm
to
afraid
go
we're going to have
walk the
to
streets and do their job. But they can't claim they haven't got the resources.
And final
They just
question.
can't be bothered.
Angus Dunsire with the final question.
Will David Cameron's grumblings in Europe damage our Eurovision chances?
David Cameron is in Brussels at the moment, and this morning complained that the EU was ignoring him. The BBC has announced that Engelbert Humperdinck is the UK's entry this year. Is David Cameron a man without love, Charlotte?
Oh, come on, anyone that's suggesting that, you know, what David Cameron said in Europe yesterday is going to have any impact on Eurovision is just, you know, deluded. The fact is Eurovision is a joke in England, and that's why we don't win.
No, Charlotte, completely disagree. Why can't Humperdinck win this year? If Jedward can come 8th last year, why can't Humperdinck win for us?
Are you optimistic, Rosie?
Well, first I'd like to say that I think David Cameron should stop his grumblings, because quite frankly, if he's not going to sign the fiscal treaty, I don't really think he has a right to be throwing his toys out the pram. Secondly, this has been a good year for British music. Adele scooped 6 Grammys, so hopefully things will change.
Thank you. Peter, final point for you.
A serious point for those of you who think we should intervene in Syria. How come Azerbaijan is in Europe? And secondly, how come it's supposed to be respectable? This country is a sort of North Korea on the Caspian. Incredibly repressive, a hereditary dictatorship, and yet it's being given this. The one final word is that my attitude towards Europe is please release me. Let me go.
We're going to have to leave it there. Azerbaijan, of course, last year's winners. I'm afraid that's all we've got time for. Thanks to the panel and the audience.